Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Today's episode is episode number 47, and we'll be looking at destiny, chance, randomness, and we'll have a mystery guest, as well as our regular contributor, Anthony. Thanks for joining us. Settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Anthony, how's it going?
I'm pretty well, Scott. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, I'm back in London now, relaxing with friends and taking it easy, just recouping and recharging my batteries. What about you?
I can't imagine why you have to recoup after 6 months in Ukraine.
That's harsh.
I know, I'm just joking. I'm good. I'm in Poland, which is one of my favorite places to be. I really love Poland. I haven't been here for a few years, so yeah, I'm doing the happy Polish dance at the moment.
I understand you've been cycling across Poland, right?
Yeah, I started in Prague and I cycled across to Katowice, which is sort of like southwest Poland, and then caught a train up here to Warsaw, where I am now.
And have you managed to see any sights on the way?
I've seen a lot, but we talked about this before the show. I wanted to briefly mention that I was in Oswiecim, which is where the Auschwitz concentration camp was located during World War II. So I went to do the Auschwitz tour, and it was a very interesting experience, of course. It was a little distasteful in some ways. I mean, for very obvious reasons, that, you know, 1 million people died there, but also that the sort of commercialism of it was a little off. But yeah, it was interesting. I got involved in a conversation with one of the tour guides there, and I asked him whether he ever has guests on his tours who say that none of this ever happened. You know, that the Holocaust is made up. And he told me, and I was a little surprised to hear this actually, he had been doing guided tours for 9 years and he hadn't had a single person say that.
Maybe they wouldn't want to say that on a tour, though.
Well, I was thinking that too. Obviously, you know, you might not want to bring that up in a group of 20 people, you know. But yeah, it was very interesting. You know, I said to him, you know, if somebody did say that to you, what would your response be? And he said, I just don't know what I would say, because, you know, these people, they say, you know, that Birkenau, which is the bigger part of the camp, Birkenau is just an enormous railway station and things like this. But yeah, I mean, when you're actually in the location, it does seem that, I mean, I think we should do a separate episode on denial, on Holocaust denial and other forms of denial, because, you know, it's a very complex issue, and it's something that you know, we obviously can't really cover adequately in 5 minutes. But I will say that there's a lot of specific details that you can look at and think, all right, well, that could have been something else. Yeah. So you look at a particular building and you go, all right, they're saying this building was used for purpose X. But looking at it, it could have been used for purpose Y. Yeah? So you look at these things in isolation, they can be potentially explained in other ways. But if you put the whole puzzle together, you just think, wow, that is an awful lot of explaining to do. If this isn't a death camp, then you know, there's a lot of alternate explanations to be rolled into one to explain it in any other way, you know. Yeah,
indeed. Did you go to both sites? You know, when you visit Auschwitz, you normally get taken to 2 different sites, yeah.
Yes, yeah. We went to both of them. The actual Auschwitz, and then Birkenau, which was the you know, by far the bigger camp with the big railway station and the latrines, and I'm sure you remember, because I know you've been there, I'm sure you remember the latrines, you know, 217 holes in the ground where you can spend 30 seconds a day, and the what would they call them? The Scheisse Patrol, I think they call them, comes in and just cleans it out, and they have the best job because they're working indoors, not outdoors. It was all a bit confronting.
Yeah, that section, it does kind of bring things home, like how degrading it would be like to be treated like cattle, basically. But yeah, the second site, Birkenau, brings home the size of the camp. Yeah, it's a very touchy subject and difficult, really. Again, I think it's like a lot of the topics we discuss. You can, if you want to take the view that all the figures are wrong, or there's something to be disputed, then you can find people who support that, and you can find people in the opposite, and you have to make a choice at the end of the day. Seems like that with a lot of the topics we discuss, really.
I agree, and I think I was looking before at a couple of websites that have polled their visitors, and the question has been, should Holocaust denial be illegal? And on the websites that I looked at, the majority of people said yes. And it is illegal in a number of countries. In 14 European countries, for example, it's illegal. And in some of those countries, you can go to prison. In Austria, you can go to prison for up to 10 years if you say that the Holocaust didn't happen.
Well, this reminds me of, my feelings are fairly clear on this. I'll ask you what you think in a minute, but I just cannot understand why people think it's a good idea to legislate what people should think and beliefs people should have. But I also, going back to Ukraine that we were discussing earlier before the show, I noticed they're starting to make it illegal for certain singers and performers to appear on TV based on their political views. And I think when you start going down that route, you're just making a big mistake. And I think the same with Holocaust denial. I'm not a Holocaust denier, by the way. I want to make that clear. But if someone wants to think that or talk about it or discuss it, they should. It's within their rights. What do you think, Anthony?
Well, look, I think it's something to discuss in another episode. I tend to agree with you, but I don't think that the other side of the argument is entirely invalid either. However, there are essentially two kinds of laws that cover this. In some countries, there are very explicit Holocaust denial laws, and they say if you deny the Holocaust, this is what may happen to you in a court. And then there are other countries. Australia is one of them. Bosnia-Herzegovina is another one, strangely. They, and France as well, they prosecute Holocaust deniers under wider laws. And these laws, in the case of France, for example, I was just looking at this before, maybe I can find it. In the case of France, so it's illegal to question the occurrence of any crime that can be defined as a crime against humanity, and that last bit is a quote. That's the French law. So there you're really opening up a Pandora's box, because you're making it much broader. It's not only illegal to deny the Holocaust, it's illegal to deny anything which the majority view would see as a crime against humanity, and that just shuts down a whole range of historical debates. And I imagine in some cases might make it quite dangerous to be a historian who's really interested in uncovering the truth.
I think it's, I'll be honest, I think it's stupid to legislate against what people think. It's just stupid. You're not going to change what they think. All you're going to do is try and make them silent. It just seems bonkers to me, but
yeah,
I am becoming a little bit more anarchistic, as you know. So,
and a lot of people have made the point on these websites that if you let Holocaust deniers just speak freely about what they believe, the vast majority of the population is going to go, wow, they're idiots, and so they're not going to do themselves a lot of favors by being allowed to speak out loud. Of course, they won't. They will. They'll be speaking to their audience, but it's not. But a lot of people have made the point, and I think there's some truth to it, that these people are not going to turn mainstream society's attitudes around. It's just not going to happen.
Well, the other thing is, it could be used for nefarious purposes, that kind of legislation. I mean, yes. Why don't we make climate change denial or people who disagree with any topic, like you're going to start to get, basically you have to have the mainstream consensus on every topic, otherwise you're in danger of the law coming down. It's just silly to me.
I think that's a really frightening prospect, and that's what worries me about these laws like the French one. Not so much the very targeted one, like the law in Austria, and obviously in Germany, but the broader ones like the French one. They worry me a lot. And in terms of climate change, that's a really interesting one, because you can almost see it happening. But fascinatingly, and we've had this discussion, I think, a few times in different forms, it seems that in the UK, the orthodoxy is you must believe in climate change, right? Increasingly, in Australia, the orthodoxy is you must doubt climate change. And you can almost see them diverging in different, directions and going, all right, now, in the UK, if you deny climate change, then we're going to fine you for that. And in Australia, going, if you make unsupported or exaggerated claims about climate change, then we're going to fine you for that.
Yeah, no, I remember we were discussing another topic, and I think it was the royal family, and I think we both realised that we do read different media. You read the Australian version, and I read the UK version. And the royal family, we get bombarded every day here in the UK about how amazing they are, how fantastic they are, and so I rebel against that. And but you tend to not see that so much, and you see the sort of outside view a bit more. But it's good to have the different perspectives.
It absolutely is. My perception with the UK press and the royal family, and I may be wrong, but my perception is that basically Murdoch hated them, and since Murdoch has been disgraced in the UK, there's been a kind of swing the other way, to a pro-royal family swing, because I would say there was a point in the 80s where he basically said, I'm going to bring down the Queen using my media empire.
Well, recently with that Hitler, the Heil Hitler salute, that was fairly out of the blue over here in the UK, that any UK newspaper would start to print that stuff. So that was actually a bit of a shock here in the UK. Mostly it's usually they've got Clarence House, the royal family's PR office, deal with the media, and they make sure that regularly everything's pumped out is positive, and that was a bit of a shock. So no, I think maybe Rupert Murdoch gets away with that abroad, but not in the UK so much. But something's changed in the last couple of months by the looks of it.
I think so, because I do remember the 80s when, Murdoch was, I suppose that was when he really became established as the media mogul that he is. The 80s were just packed with royal scandals, just one after the other.
Yeah, the royal scandals. Sometimes those were kind of they weren't so bad in a way. They were kind of like the soap opera of royal life, and they weren't quite as damaging as people might think. I don't think.
Okay. A lot worse from the outside than it was from the inside.
Yeah, I was going to say we're a bit strapped for time, so we should probably move on to our main topic that we were going to discuss.
Ooh, yes.
And we were talking about Holocaust denial and how people, maybe should have the right to believe what they want to believe and express their thoughts and their mind, and that kind of takes us on to whether we do actually have the ability to express our thoughts and our mind and our will and our free will. And I think that's what you were going to talk about, right?
I am going to talk about that, and it is a very, very heavy topic. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at something about Donald Trump, which I was just looking up on Google.
Well, do tell before we.
I'll tell you later in the context of free will.
Sure.
So look, yeah, we've touched on this in a few different episodes. So I guess we, decided in the space of a few conversations that it might be time to just go straight for it. So let's start by having a look at the basic concept, though it may seem a little obvious. Basically, if free will exists in human affairs, it means that you and I are both the conscious sources of our own thoughts and actions. So what we think and what we do comes from us, and we have a choice about it. Now, believe it or not, in saying that, we already strike huge problems. And a lot of scientists and philosophers and other folks have agonized over this. And the problem is basically that the idea of this conscious agency, where we decide what we're going to do, doesn't actually fit into anything else we know about the universe. So, so basically, what we know is that the universe is an interplay of deterministic events and indeterministic events. And starting with determinism, it's when every result has an earlier cause. So you can trace anything you observe back to those causes in kind of a logical order if you know enough about the system that you're looking at. And it works for, it works for everything from molecules to forests. And for a long time, that's basically how scientists thought the universe was, the clockwork universe where everything can be traced back to its logical prior cause. Now, if you apply that to human affairs and to neurology, you get the idea that every human decision and every human action is an inevitable and necessary consequence of earlier states. And if that's the case, then we aren't free to act as we want, because different earlier events will produce certain effects, whether we like it or not. So the whole of history and even cosmology becomes this huge chain of causes and effects. Now, to bring it down to the human level, and we can look at a fairly extreme example, because this, this will really sort of bring it into focus, I suppose. If you take a psychopath who kills someone, on the deterministic model, he's a necessary product of his genes and his upbringing, and all of those happen via cause and effect. So on a genetic level, his paternal grandmother met his paternal grandfather, they had sex. His maternal grandfather and grandmother did the same, then their offspring met each other, they had sex, produced the psychopath, and he had no say at all in the genes that produced him. And then on the upbringing level, well, we could go through, a similar chain of events, but it would be a much longer one, full of, all the things that happened to him in his childhood and things his parents did to him and the experiences that he had in the real world when he was, dating as a teenager, entering the workplace, and so on. You put all of those things together and you come up with a person who can only be that person and therefore can only act in a certain way. So you put that person in a situation where they have an opportunity to kill, or maybe they engineer that situation. Either way, they can only do what their genes and their social experiences have primed them to do. So to step away and not kill at that moment, they would have to be a completely different person. To change the outcome, you'd have to have God reaching down and plucking the psychopath out of the situation and putting someone else there instead.
I'd like to interject at this point, but I know there's more to it, but I just wanted to comment so far on that. I've heard some of these theories and philosophies, and just on what's been said so far,
Yep.
I just wanted to say that I don't see that at all. It seems to me that I know these guys are scientists and they do lots of experiments, and maybe you may mention an experiment which I know has caused some ripples recently, but it seems to me these are clearly influences, not things that leave people with absolutely no decisions or choices to make. Not that we can talk about whether people actually do make decisions, but these are clearly influences. Upbringings. There's plenty of people who have had similar upbringings, and similar genetics and similar influences. At the end of the day, you can still make a decision. You can still make a choice whether to kill someone. And I think it's dangerous. It's dangerous philosophy to accept without discussion. And I think there's no problem with these neuroscientists coming up with theories, as long as they don't start preaching it as fact, because I think it's potentially dangerous.
Well, okay, let's talk a bit later about the danger, because there is a danger. There's a huge moral danger, especially when it comes to criminal justice.
Yeah.
And it is a very thorny issue, which I want to go into with you. But You're right. There are choices involved, but this argument doesn't mean that we act as robots. It means that the choices that we make are the only choices that we can make. So let's imagine as a counterexample someone who's potentially a killer and goes off to get help, or finds themselves in a really loving romantic relationship that is a kind of sanctuary, and somehow manages to avoid becoming a danger to society. That person had no choice either. Given who they were always going to be attracted to the person with whom they ended up in the relationship. They were always going to get to the point where they realized they needed help. This is just the person they are. So that person made better choices because they are that person. That's the argument.
Just a quick advert break. Our email is scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Check out our past episodes. We've got lots of interesting guests, and you can find us on YouTube on 2 channels. We talk about conspiracies, mysteries, injustices, corruption, religion, war, peace. You can leave your own message and we can base our show around what you think. That's what we intend to do. Help us find the truth in the news. Find our YouTube channels. We've got all the episodes on there. Truth Sentinel and Truth Sentinel 1. Subscribe to both so you get notified of everything. Click on the About section, you'll find all the links. Have you got something you'd like to advertise? If it's truth related, honest and ethical, get in contact. You can help us, we can help you. We sell our own t-shirts with "The greatest enemy of truth is blind belief in authority" on the back. Just $20 plus postage and packing. Let us know your size, just send us an email, we can sort it out. We've also teamed up with trutht-shirts.com, and they make political t-shirts. Let people know where you stand, basically. Use the code TRUTH1, you get a 10% discount and we get a donation. They make all kinds of political t-shirts and they can customize them for you as well. If you've got any ideas for publicity stunts, get in contact. We need to escalate this channel, make it much bigger. We need your help. Please support us. Thank you.
Now, obviously, there are problems with this view of the universe. One of them is that the universe isn't completely deterministic. We know this. We know that not everything that happens in the world is a strict chain of cause and effect. Yeah. And actually, one of the biggest scientific developments of the 20th century was that scientists started to understand and discover more of indeterminism in the structure of the world. Yeah. And that allowed them to kind of mellow out and refine this kind of clockwork view of the universe that they had before. In particular, in the field of quantum mechanics, which of course began in the 20th century, and that was huge because lots of things that happen in the quantum world don't obey laws of cause and effect. They're indeterministic as far as we can tell. To take up your comment about scientists, I completely agree. Whenever we talk about science, we can only talk about the current state of scientific knowledge of the world. And I mean, this is one example. It's possible that these quantum particles are obeying rules of cause and effect that we just don't understand because we're not smart enough. That's always possible.
Well, on that topic, I'd like to make another comment about us not being smart enough.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem. I think we should really steer away from making any confident decisions on whether there's free will or not, because we don't possess we haven't reached a stage in our development of technology or in a development of our own minds to make these calls. I mean, like I was listening to Sam Harris talk about the experiments where they got people under MRI scanners to choose left and right at random. And to identify which letter of the alphabet they saw when they made the decision. So they get different letters of the alphabet flashing up. They make the decision where they're going to press the left and right button, and then when they make that decision, they've got to look and see which letter that was flashing up when they made the decision. Mm-hmm. And they observed that there was some brain activity before the decision was made. And they seem to be making a lot of conclusions out of this pertaining to free will, and that really the decision was made long before, or even a short time before they actually made their decision. And so Sam Harris kept saying, so you're not the author of your thoughts. And I thought it was fairly ridiculous, really, that they think they can. We don't even understand these MRI scans fully yet. You can't identify a specific thought, for example, and then say, oh, that guy's thinking about what he's having for dinner tonight. We can only really identify very, very basic thoughts with an MRI scanner, and to come up with such huge conclusions based on that, I think is really silly. And it kind of annoys me about science sometimes that these kind of things are made, and then scientists and neuroscientists talk about them with confidence. That's the problem for me. It's like I have no problem with them saying, could this mean that we don't actually have free will and we don't actually author our own decisions? But it seems to me they sometimes say, yeah, we're not really the author of our decisions,
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's you're right about MRIs. I don't think we're at the point yet where we can identify a thought and say what it is. I think we're more at the stage that more like what the NSA claims it does with messages. It doesn't understand the content of the message. It just goes, oh, look, there's a message. But I think that's probably what's happening with MRIs, but a little bit more precise than that. We're certainly on our way. In terms of things that we do understand very well, quantum mechanics is one. We can say that we understand it well because it has proved to be essential in the production of like a whole raft of 20th century inventions. So like everything from LED displays, transistors, which of course were the basis of radio, lasers, solar cells, thermoelectric materials, polymers, digital cameras, all these things just couldn't have been invented unless we understood the indeterminism of quantum mechanics. None of it would work, and none of it could have been conceived. So if you have a whole bunch of real-world stuff that is there because of this idea, then you have to go, well, that's a fairly firm idea. Yeah. And people who want to, who like the idea of free will, which I think is most of us, might feel like, well, look, here we see, not everything is straight cause and effect. Some things just happen because they happen. So, that kills this argument that we can only be who we are because of this chain of cause and effect. But actually, it puts another problem in front of us, something which is called the randomness objection. If you say that things are indeterministic, then what you're saying is that some things truly are random, and they're the product of blind chance. Now, quantum events happen in that way, as far as we understand them. And again, there is the possibility that we just don't understand them well enough. But it works in some parts of the macro world too. For example, weather forecasts are only estimates of probability because our weather systems are indeterministic. And population dynamics are the same. We can predict rises and falls of population, but only based on probability because they're not deterministic. And then there's things like, the half-life of radioactive elements and things like this. And again, lots of good invention and lots of good work has been based on that stuff. But the thing is, if you accept indeterminism, then you've got a universe where some things have a strictly defined cause, and everything else is just chance. So again, in that universe, you can't really say, well, people choose their thoughts and actions. They just think stuff and they do stuff, So either way, free will just doesn't fit if you accept a deterministic universe or not. This free will thing, it's either a huge anomaly that works in a completely different way to everything else we know of in the world, or it's an illusion. And
I think one thing that Sam Harris didn't mention when talking about a lot of these topics was that we can choose our influences. I mean, he may argue that we don't truly choose anything, but we can choose our influences. So whilst you can say someone's upbringing and what they watched on TV and what they read and their genetics and everything led them to this point, people also, assuming we have any kind of choice, which I personally think we do, they can decide on what they're going to read, where they're going to go, and all these things affect their decisions in the future, but they made those choices about their influences too. And they also made choices about, for example, whether to leave a violent partner, or decisions about their life previous to that. So they had a say in their life before coming to this point.
Sort of misses the point of the argument, or it's a refutation of the argument. It's one or the other. The point of the argument is not people don't make choices. It's that people can only make the choice that they can make. So if you left a relationship that was making you unhappy, you, being you, could only have done that. Another person, you might look at another person who stayed in a relationship that made them unhappy and go, well, they could choose to leave like I did. But they're a different person. They're not going to do that because of who they are. That's the argument.
Yeah, it's slightly confusing. I must admit, when I was listening to Sam Harris, it does become slightly confusing as to what he's saying, but he did seem to be alluding that we don't actually make decisions based on this experiment that was done, that the decision was being made somewhere else. We weren't. He kept saying we're not an author of that decision, of those thoughts. We don't actually author our thoughts. So if someone tells you to think of a number between 1 and 10, it's not actually you that's coming up with that number. The MRI scanner was kind of, he seemed to be strongly implying that you don't decide on the number. It pops into your head. So he didn't say where it's coming from, but
well, another way to look at it is in a sort of Freudian Jungian way, maybe a Jungian way, because if we looked at it in a Freudian way, we'd have to take cocaine first. I mean, Jung was really big on this idea that our subconscious controls us. So that is still us. But his ideas were that very often we don't know the motivations of what we do. We consciously choose to take a particular action, but a whole bunch of subconscious contemplation has gone into that, none of which has ever reached the threshold of consciousness. And I think maybe Sam Harris is trying to say a similar thing, but coming at it from a different angle. You know, Jung was coming at it from this kind of depth psychology angle. Harris is coming at it from a neuroscience angle. But they're sort of saying very similar things. So they are still our choices, but we're not conscious of what drove us towards that choice.
Well, undoubtedly we have limitations or unseen limitations to random thoughts, like different people. If you live in Europe and someone says think of a city and you've never travelled outside Europe, you're probably going to think of a European city or maybe a US city. If you ask someone in India the same question, they're probably going to come up with different random cities if you told them to think of a random city. So I understand that concept. We're limited according to our upbringing and background to a certain extent.
Let's do a little thought experiment now. It's a variation on one that Sam Harris does that is very much in the area that you're talking about. So let's do it now.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of a flower, any flower at all, and don't tell me which one you thought of. Okay. Got one?
Yep.
Okay, good. That's it. The experiment's finished.
Okay, shall we go home?
Yes. So did you think of a paphiopedilum?
Of course I did.
You didn't, did you?
I don't know. What's that?
It's a shame because they're really beautiful flowers. They're a kind of orchid. And, orchid enthusiasts call them paphs for short. And they have a little sort of cult of their own inside the serious orchid fanciers community. They're very unusual, very beautiful, and striking flowers. But why didn't you think of a paphiopedilum?
Well, I did first of all, and then I thought, no, I'm going to go for daisy instead.
See, the point is, I seem to be giving you a very wide choice, right? You can choose any flower at all, but you've got limitations on your choices. The first one is, there are a whole bunch of flowers whose names you don't know, and you cannot choose any of those flowers.
That's true, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So did you choose Daisy?
Yes, I did, yeah.
All right. So why did you choose Daisy?
I guess it was probably the first, if someone's going to ask me that question, there's going to be a certain amount of flowers that instantly pop into my head that have maybe been cropped up in my mind in the last few years. Daisy is there's a popular song, Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer, do. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. I think that song popped into my head as soon as you said flower. So
where did that come from?
Well, I think it just came from my subconscious. So I would say that it came from.
So did you think at any point, okay, try and think of songs that have the names of flowers in them, and perhaps there's one that I can use as my flower?
No, I think what happened was throughout my life I'll be presented with all kinds of flowers in various forms of media, via song, pictures, photos, lessons, and I think those are that was the group of flowers that I was going to be trawling from, and my subconscious, which I have some influence over in choosing what I want to listen to, etc., decided on Daisy.
All right. Well, look, the Sam Harris argument, and I think it's quite a persuasive one, is this: you can take all the flowers in the world, and I mean, just choosing only orchids, there are 40,000 varieties of orchids in the world, right? All of them are out because you don't know the names of any of them. Okay, they're all technical names that only orchid fanciers would know. So straight away, the vast majority of the flowers in the world are out. Then you are presented, from all the names of the flowers you do know, your subconscious presents you with a few, or maybe just one. The one that it presented you with, it sounds like, was Daisy. You didn't really have an internal conflict. Shall I go Rose? Shall I go Daisy? You didn't really have that. It might have happened, though. And then you would have to pick one. And you would have a thought, like, I'll go for Daisy because, like, it's the song. I like the song. Where does that come from? Do you consciously decide to think to yourself, okay, think that you like that song so that you'll choose Daisy? You don't do any of that. That's thinking your thoughts before you think them. It's all your subconscious, paring things down, and you might have a thought like, I'll go for Daisy because it's in that song. But that's one of 1,000 possible thoughts you could have had, only you were never presented with any of the other 999 thoughts. Your subconscious only presented you with the one, and you went with it.
That's true, but
how is that free will? Where was the free will?
Well, it's not actually to do so much with free will. That's to do with randomness, and I think the flower that you'll choose will be based on your life experiences, which you did have some influence over in making choices and decisions. What you've decided to read, what music you've listened to, your upbringing, yes, and all these things will have influenced it. But it's that's to do with randomness. It's not to do with whether I could have made the decision not to answer your question. So it seems to me it's not so much. We can't read too much into that regarding free will.
Yes, but the argument is basically the argument is that you were presented with a choice, and more so than I mean, you didn't go through all the flowers that you knew and chose the one that you wanted to choose, so much as it was just handed to you by your subconscious brain.
Isn't that more to do with logistics, though? Like if I had pre-knowledge that you were going to ask me the question, I could have gone up and gone away for a week and on a retreat and memorized, learned as many types of flowers as possible, and then my answer would have been would have had more of a pool of flowers to choose from. But would that really change anything?
You're the only person that I know who would think of the humorous possibility of going on a flower name learning retreat.
Well, I think I might do it now. Actually, it actually sounds quite nice.
Why did you think of that?
It just popped into my head.
Exactly.
I wondered. We've got a mystery guest that's due to come on, and I thought maybe we could contact him shortly and
sure.
Bring him into this topic, and then he wants to talk about another mystery topic as well. So we always welcome any of our listeners to come and join us on Truth Sentinel, and we have a listener who's kindly agreed to come and join us today, Don Everett Smith Jr. Welcome to Truth Sentinel. It's good to have you.
First of all, Scott, thank you so much. And I want to just, before we begin, I want to simply say I've had a chance to look through what Truth Sentinel has done. And you guys are part of carrying the torch because of, I guess you would call it like a brand new media that's been taken over, where you guys are asking the tough questions that, unfortunately, bits and parts of the mainstream journalism are just not asking. And you guys do it boldly. You do it in a very professional manner. And you guys do the investigating and asking the big questions that just don't seem to be asked. And I just want to congratulate you and say thank you for doing that. We need shows like this and podcasts like this to just say, you know what, I don't agree with this, or is there a little bit more than what we see here? And I just want to simply say thank you for doing that.
Oh, thanks, Don. Very kind of you to say so. I think you're right that the mainstream media have become a bit sort of sanitized and maybe a bit politically correct sometimes. And I think there's more and more people who are taking to alternative media to try and express their views, and just normal people. It's good to hear the man on the street's views and hear listeners as well. We're not trying to be, famous or become personalities, and we just want to hear what everyone thinks, and that's why it's good to hear people like you as well coming on the show and talking about topics. And first, I wanted to ask you what you thought of free will, and whether you think our lives are kind of preordained, or whether we have influence over them, we make decisions, we have the ability to decide what happens, or are we a victim of our genetics, our upbringing, our influences? How much do they affect our lives, do you think?
I'm going to come at this because I have never shied away from the fact that I am a born-again Christian. I've grown up in a household where faith and church is very important to me. In fact, I went this morning, and faith is very important to me. I believe the execution of the faith is very important. And I had chatted with you beforehand. My basic principle with my faith is don't be a jerk about it. Simple as that. Like, my faith is not a weapon. It is something that should be to bring hope to people. And when it comes to this topic of free will, I mean, obviously I do very much believe in a very guiding providential hand of God. But also at the same time, I also very much believe that there is a grander purpose that he has. But also another thing, though, is I believe that also God gives free will. And that's part of freedom. And I believe that freedom and that free will to choose where to go is something that should be cherished and cultivated. Now, I will admit there's some people that can only go so far. I mean, like I know people that are disabled, that their entire life is just a bedroom and a laptop, and that's as far as they can go. And I believe that certain things are preordained for us that we're kind of stuck with, that we have to deal with. Some people fight alcoholism. Other people are fighting debt. Other people are fighting cancer. And you kind of go, well, how do you handle that? And I believe that there are just some circumstances we have no choice but to face and to take on. And that's where I believe free will comes in, because we can choose to have an attitude. I can sit here and say over and over again, like, oh, I'm having a bad day, I listen to the news and this sad thing happened. But the thing is that I believe that, honestly, free will flat out is one of the gifts from God. I mean, that was one of the things, if you go back and you read Genesis, that it was one of the first things he gave people. And I'm a huge proponent of defending that right of free will, defending that. Now, whether it's there or not, I on some level obviously believe that there is a free will that we execute and that we go forward in. But my attitude is that I believe that people have the right. It's one of the things that very much God does say, hey, I've got a plan, you can be a part of it or not be a part of it, that's your choice. And but also at the same time, I believe that he does, that was one of the things that does need to be defended. And it's one of the reasons why, again, I complimented your show, because there is so much out there that is trying to get us to think the same way on one thing, that is trying to get us to have the same opinion, to like the same things, or to kind of over here be a distraction to something while some other underhanded shenanigans goes on. So that sort of thing is that really on some level really just I can't get over just how much people need to be told, hey, look, you have a brain, you use it. I mean, it's like free will. I mean, it's much the same way. What do you want? Do you want do you want to have a chocolate bar for dinner, or do you want to have a salad? There are obvious consequences to if you have a chocolate bar every single night for dinner, you're going to put on weight. If you have a salad, you're going to look pretty good and handsome like you guys. So, I mean, it's kind of like, how do you do that? What do you do? And that's why, to me, I really genuinely do believe in free will.
I was going to say to you, Anthony, what about the spiritual and faith and fate? This is something that's often ignored by neuroscientists, and I know Sam Harris brought up about the soul, that even people can't even choose their own soul. So even if you bring into the equation people believing in that they have a soul, they still can't choose their soul. So they still don't have free will. But they do seem to ignore spirituality, and there does seem to be like a hidden kind of force that some people call fate, and I experienced it last night playing a game of Risk, which is like a world domination game with my friend, and he rolled 6 sixes in a row
Nice.
and defeated me, and I just couldn't believe it. And but it seems like there was a hidden force at play there.
I will say it. Let me interrupt Anthony real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just going to simply say, your friend's a tool of the devil. That's the only way he could win.
I'm going to tell him later. Yeah.
Actually, Don, when you mentioned people who have adverse circumstances in their lives, because I'm in Poland at the moment, I thought of a singer called Monika Kuczynska. Monika Kuczynska was this year's Polish entry to the Eurovision Song Contest, and you see, we are highbrow and intellectual here at True Sentinel. But she was notable because she was the first Eurovision Song Contest entrant to be wheelchair bound, and she was wheelchair bound because she was in a car accident in which she nearly died. So she has a beautiful voice naturally, and she entered this contest and sang a song of hope, kind of a whatever the adverse circumstances of your life, don't give up, like life can be beautiful whatever your situation type of song. So I mean, she's clearly a very strong person, and from one point of view you could say probably a great advertisement for free will. But listening to the song, this is my question, and I think it's also kind of Sam Harris's question. Two people who are listening to the song, let's imagine there are two people listening to Monika Kuczynska singing about her overcoming her troubles to lead a beautiful life. Both of them have a drug problem, and one of them says, all right, she's right, her problems are worse than mine and she got over them, so it's time to just man up and get over it. And the other continues doing what they're doing. Is that an exercise of free will, or are those people bound by their experiences and their genes and their personalities, one bound to accept the message and one bound to reject the message?
Well, it's funny you should say that with drug addiction, is because drug addiction is very, very, very powerful. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit trail, but it's one I know very well. And I'm a very, very, very strong proponent of Alcoholics Anonymous and their books. And they talk about this very thing. They do mention that there are people that have, the big book that they call an Alcoholics Anonymous. There are some people that are just so far down the trail that there's nothing that they can do to come back. However, there's other people that that are able to do that by working the program and having what is called the spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. And And I don't mean to go back this in a spiritual experience, but if you're using an example like drug addiction is one of those things that has just clouded a mind so badly that you have no choice. It's like almost like you're not that far from being one of those things running around The Walking Dead. Where it's just kind of like, the only thing that I will just keep going forward, and maybe I'll stop at a wall, and I'm just looking for something to feed on. And that's basically what drug addiction turns the addict. So at some point in time, someone has to hit some sort of bottom, where you go, this is the line, this is it. To quote Popeye, this is all I can stand, I can't stand no more. And you go, I'm going to get help for this. And somebody like that, the two people, there are some people that just give up. That's what it boils down to. Is that there's so many people in life that they go, I just give up. That's it. I'm done. And they don't get in there and do the work. Because life is not easy. Life is not easy. It is a very hard road to hoe, to borrow more cliches, and I promise I will be saying more cliches as I continue on.
I was just going to interrupt slightly here,
Sure.
sorry, because we're a bit limited for time, so
Sure.
I wanted to ask you if we could move on to your main topic today, which you were going to talk about, which I haven't told Anthony about, our mystery topic.
Gotcha. All right, I will be very quick because all of this fits into it. Here is the mystery topic, literal mystery topic, Anthony. I have started a website called The Sherlock Conversations. It's found at thesherlockconversations.wordpress.com, and it is also, I've started a Facebook page called facebook.com/Sherlock Conversations. And my goal is to share some of the aspects that I have learned from rereading the Sherlock Holmes canon, written the way Arthur Conan Doyle did it. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the Sherlock Holmes canon is what really got me to it is when I read in A Study in Scarlet how Watson began listing all of the things that Holmes were into. Oh, he was into this, Holmes like that, doesn't know a thing about this. And then they got into this topic of astronomy. And Holmes basically says, he's like, I'm going to see if I can actually get, I want to see if I can get the right quote for this. Holmes basically says, he goes, what does it matter if I go around the sun, or if the Earth goes around the sun, or it goes around the moon? How's that going to help my work? And how I basically have interpreted that is what Sherlock has done is he has gotten to a point where he has been able to say, I'm going to push all of this out of my brain, all the unnecessary information out of my brain. I'm not going to get involved in petty squabbles. I'm not going to get involved with, he said this about me and that hurts my feelings. I'm not going to get involved with watching reality TV show. I'm not going to get involved listening to horrible music on basic top 40 radio. I'm not going to listen to any of that. What I'm going to be into is just going straight forward into focusing what I need to focus in on. Here's the quote that he says, what the deuce is it to me? You say that we go around the sun? If we go around the moon, it would not make a penny worth of difference to me or to my work. And then he further adds, no man burdens his mind with small matters unless he has some very good reason for doing so. So the reason why I have decided to really add to the voice of Sherlockians and add to this perspective is I like pushing this desire of, let's just push away the silly things that we don't need in our life. It doesn't matter. What are some of the things that I can focus in on? And sometimes it's almost like a codependency where I almost have to be up in arms. It's sort of like I was upset with the shooting of Cecil the Lion. But at some point, Cecil's death and the idiot that killed him are not going to have an effect on my life. And I need to step back and let this go and think whatever happens, happens. And so I need to focus in on my personal stuff. And this is one of the reasons why I became such a fan of Sherlock and why I reread the stories. I watch the TV shows. I've gone back. I've been watching some of the Basil Rathbone stuff. Is because you see little iotas and little pieces of that. And that's basically what I was here, what Scott has been kind enough to let me come on and talk about today.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we spend a lot of time worrying and fretting and talking about and listening to stuff maybe that doesn't matter. I guess we have to work out what does matter and what doesn't matter. But I saw a bit of Sherlock Holmes tonight, the British version. I know the American TV program, if we're talking about the TV program, that is, of course, is different. But he looks at people and he works out a lot of information just by things he can see. That's one of his skills.
Yeah, very observational, just by taking a look at someone and say, like, oh, I can tell that you were over on 8th Avenue. And the guy's like, how did you know that? And he's like, well, you've got this little stub there that's from this on there, and then I know that they're doing construction work over on 8th Avenue, da-da-da-da-da. And it's just, and that's part of the fun of it. That's like just one of the things that he does. And that was all based around some of the things that Dr. Joseph Bell did. Like, Joseph Bell could look at someone and just diagnose, like the guy didn't say a thing, and he'd be like, oh, you're here because you have a cold. Really? How do you know? Well, because you've got this Kleenex tucked in there, and it doesn't look like something that I want to touch.
Yeah. What do you think, Anthony? Do you think we do spend too much time focusing on things that maybe we could get rid of and just focus on the things that matter?
I think that's a very difficult question. It's difficult to find the balance sometimes, especially between looking out at the world and looking, I suppose, into yourself and at the people around you, you know, who you care about. And because looking out into the world is often a very disturbing experience. But at the same time, if nobody had cared about the Cecil the Lion killing, for example, then that guy would have just gone on doing what he was doing, and you know, I suppose justice wouldn't have been done. But more importantly, he may have gone on to kill again. So it's kind of it's in finding that balance. I think you can't you know, take the world's problems onto your shoulders 24/7 because you'll go insane. But it also it frustrates me a little bit when people don't step outside of themselves. And I want to just briefly relate an experience that I had about, I guess, 3 years ago. I was in a language school in Ukraine, and it was just announced that the Ukrainian government was adopting similar laws to what the Russian government had adopted, which are the anti-homosexual propaganda laws. Now, the laws basically say that it's illegal to disseminate homosexual propaganda. But what they're actually saying is, if we find out that you're homosexual, we can come to your home and arrest you. And there's a very strong undertone in the laws as they stand that homosexuals are all pedophiles. Now, we know in the West that homosexuals are not all pedophiles, but this myth persists. That's hard to say. This myth persists in former Soviet countries, and it's used to victimize a portion of the community. So this law came into effect on a day when I happened to be in this language school, and the foreigners who worked in the language school were all having a discussion about it. You know, some of them were pro-gay rights, some of them not so much, but they were discussing it as a kind of current topical issue. The local teachers who were teaching there in school had nothing to say about it, and it's their country, and it was an important legal change that came into force on that day. I found that a really dispiriting experience, because it meant we don't care about 10% of our community. We don't have a strong opinion for them. We don't have a strong opinion against them. We just don't care about them at all, and the government can do with them whatever it wants. And I think that a society who feels that way is going to be abused. You know, so like I say, it's part of finding that balance. You do have to sometimes look out into the world and become concerned about things, but you also have to leave enough time for yourself.
And also, I guess, decide whether it's things that you can do anything about. If you can't change anything, in any way at all, then is there any point discussing it? But Don, what other things can we learn from Sherlock Holmes?
Well, like I said, I mean, like the big thing has been like learning how to focus, because that's probably his greatest ability, is his ability to focus, and then before he makes an educated guess, he has as much information as he needs. Because one of the things was, and I read this from an amazing book called Mastermind by Maria Costo. Oh my gosh, I'm going to ruin her last name. It's like a very, very Russian last name. It's like Maria Kostova, and I did an interview with her a long time ago, about 2 years, a year and a half ago maybe, and I have that posted on the Sherlock site. And one of the things that she says in her book is Sherlock may not have all the information in front of him, but he will have a plan on how to get that information. Because that's the other thing when it comes to problem-solving skills. Anthony said it earlier when he says that when you look at the problems of the world, you could be overwhelmed and would drive you insane. So you come up with a plan to focus on what is right in front of you, even if it's just a very basic thing. And this is a 12-step. Basically, when we were talking about the 12-step program earlier, one day at a time, one step at a time, where it's sort of like, what can I deal with? Well, right now, deal with the thing that is immediately in front of you. Like if you look at your house and you're going, oh my gosh, my whole house is cluttered, I need to clean it up, I've got my mother-in-law coming, and I want this place to look nice. What do? Well, where are you standing at the moment? I'm in my living room. Okay, what is on your couch? Well, all these old newspapers. Then work on that. And what I usually find is by doing something like that, I'm then able to then come up with a plan on, then next, after I do this, I'll do the chair, then I'll get the vacuum, and then there, I've done with the living room. Then I go after the bedroom. And that's the way Sherlock Holmes approached. He would go, what is in front of me? And he would have a plan for it. If he didn't have the information, he would have a plan on how to get the information. And he did it one step at a time. He went with the people that were near him. It was one of the reasons why he sent out the Baker Street irregulars. He couldn't find information. Like he'd be looking for a carriage with a certain person's name in it, and he wouldn't know where to look for that. Or there'd be like London in 1890s is filled with like hundreds and hundreds of carriages, and who has that type of time? So what he did was he would send out the people, and he would send out the ones nearest him, and he basically go, okay, here's a pound or whatever they had for British currency at that time, and they would say, here's a pound, here's a penny, whatever, go find this information, and he would send it out amongst them, and then they would come back to him with the information. So that's the other thing, is whatever it is that you have in life, have a plan of attack, and then do with what is near you. Take care of what is nearest to you first. You want to change the world, you're tired of the poverty, what is nearest to you? For me, there are food pantries that are near me within 10 minutes drive. If I care about that, if that's where my focus is, I'm going to go in that direction. That's the sort of thing that people need to do instead of worrying about, like again, I'll say this, the Cecil the Lion thing, using that as an example, of course I was upset and I was offended by the actions of this idiot man. But at some point in time, I have to put that anger behind me and know, am I in Zimbabwe? No. Do I live near Minneapolis where this guy lived, to write about him and to question him and to ask him what he why he did this and to get an answer from that? No, I'm nowhere near that. But what I can do is if it inspires me to do something about that, I'm going to be a little bit extra nicer to my cats, or I will go and volunteer at an animal shelter. That sort of thing.
I think that's a very good idea, actually. Yeah, I mean, I think with some of the topics we've discussed on past shows, you sometimes feel helpless. Like, how can you possibly affect these things? And at the end of the day, you can't in a lot of cases. And I think it's good, to change the world around you, as Gandhi I think said as well, and create and improve your own surroundings and be good to other people and try and do your own thing. But you're not, and that's the only way you can really see some of the improvements happening around you. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, I'm going to come in here with an anecdote. I hope it's not too far off the point. So last year we had the Sydney siege, which we talked about on the program, and where an absolute nutcase walked into a cafe and took its occupants hostage, and eventually 3 people in the cafe died. The nutcase in question was claiming to act on behalf of Islamic State. He actually did. He had no connection with the Islamic State at all, but that's another story. There were reprisals against Muslims in Australia. For example, there was one Muslim woman that was pushed off a moving train in Melbourne. But there was also something which happened. It was a hashtag that cropped up on Twitter, and it was called Ride With Me. And people who wrote messages to that hashtag were saying, basically, if you're a Muslim in an Australian city and you're feeling under threat, I'll pick you up in my car and take you home so you'll be safe. And that's dealing with what's in front of you. That's saying, all right, there are these huge world issues, but what it comes down to is, you're a person, I'm a person, you're in danger, I will help you. And so I think that's probably a very good example of what you're talking about.
That's an absolutely amazing example of that sort of thing, because that's one of the things that's so great about that. That's a way of helping out by thinking outside the box. That's actually step 2 in this, doing something like thinking outside the box. Step is more or less like, let's do it in a different way. Today, real quick, not to go beat on this, I was listening in church, and they were talking about the story of Jesus healed a man that was lowered in a bed. The house that Jesus was in was completely surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of people, and these 4 guys climbed up on top of the roof with their friend, and they basically cut out the ceiling and lowered this guy down and basically said, hey, can you heal the guy? And there's a level of thinking about that I admire. Like, these are guys that are just saying, like, all right, we're surrounded by this, and we're surrounded by this crowd of people. All right, sorry, Joe, we're going to have to take you home. You're in trouble. And what I admired about these guys was these 4 guys said, no, this is the best source of healing for our friend, and we're going to do it. And I'm sure they had to pay repair damages. Unfortunately, that's not mentioned in Luke. Because I was even thinking the owner of the house must have been screaming up a storm. Like, what are you doing? So I'm like, I put a nail in the wrong spot, and I'm afraid that my landlord's going to come down and say something to me. So, I mean, it's that sort of thing. It's this thinking outside the box. And so for these people to go, all right, let's extend humanity and kindness to Muslims. Mm-hmm. I'll be right there to pick you up. That sort of thing absolutely moves me and just restores my faith. That when I hear about something like the killing of Cecil, it restores my faith and it gives me something positive to focus in on. And I think that's just an awesome story, and just goes to show you how awesome Australians are.
Indeed. I just wanted to say that that's a great way, a great moral to have on today's show, is deal with what's in front of you. And if anyone out there is pondering on a decision at the moment and not sure what to do, then that's a good place to start. Deal with what's in front of you, and of course, there's a debate as to whether you actually can make that decision yourself. But we'll probably come back to this topic in the future. And I'm sorry, Don, we probably run out of time today. But
that's fine. This has been my pleasure.
It's great talking to you, and you're welcome to come back on again anyway, and talk about continue with this topic or another one. It's been great talking to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and Anthony, it's been my pleasure today to speak with you as well. Thank you so much for both of you to have me on.
The pleasure was all mine, Don. It was really good to talk to you. I hope you will come on again.
Oh, I would love to come on. I'm a comic book writer, so I'll got stuff to plug.
Well, talking about plugin, Don, where can people find out about your Sherlock blogs?
Okay, they can go to Sherlock Conversations, all one word, .wordpress.com, and they can also, I spend a lot of time on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Sherlock Conversations. And Anthony just liked it, so that means Anthony is awesome in so many different... He's awesome all around the world now at this point, in Australia, Poland, and wherever else he is, and now in the United States. So, Anthony, you're always welcome here.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh, and you too.
But for listeners, if you want to find the Facebook page, if you type the Sherlock Conversations into Google, the Facebook page will come up. It's about the 4th link on the list.
Oh, very cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Scott, you're always welcome too.
Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. And as this is the end of the show, I'm going to have to say thank you to you, Anthony, as well, and for joining us today. And hope you'll join us again shortly. And I'm not sure what the next topic is, but we'll think of one.
I'm sure we will.
So thanks everyone, and catch you both later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take it easy.